好，就已经开始了，这个现在是 live 了。
Yeah, okay. 好的。So this is December 7th, our first class in December. And we have classes each month, twice, the first and the third Wednesday. And it is being live streamed on King On channel on YouTube. And the recording will be available on YouTube as well. So if you missed any class or if you want to go back to check on something, you can always go on YouTube to look for it. Today, instead of doing a popular American or English song, we're reading a real poem by Shelley, 雪莱. The English poet Shelley, he wrote this poem called Ozymandias. I like to make it in italic letters. And I matched it with Yang Shen's poem called Lin Jiangxian. Lin Jiangxian is the name of this 我们叫词牌, okay? The pattern of this Chinese Song Dynasty poem is called the 词牌, and this 词牌 is 临江仙. Usually this name has nothing to do with the content of the poem. So when we name a poem with its 词牌, we usually would add the first line of it so that people can identify which one it is. Even one poet can write many, more than one poems in that pattern. So that's even more important to be able to identify it in some other way. And the one topic that we will be talking about today is the Napoleonic Wars. There was a series of battles and wars raged in Europe, and the main character is Napoleon. He led the French army and invaded many other countries for several years. Yeah, eventually he lost it. Here is a list of vocabulary, and we're going to go over them a little later after we talk about the Napoleonic Wars. And here I have one word that I spelled wrong last time, so I put that in the red color, highlighted in red. One little thing I want to mention is the word 是, when we look at the name of usually a literary figure, and it appears to be that person's last name is 是, and that's not his last name. When you see a name that starts with the word 是, it's because he is no longer a family man. He is now, we say 出家人, he's out of his household. He's cut all the ties with his own family, so he no longer uses the name that he was given at birth, and he chose, or his master would choose a name for him, and they put the word 是 in front so that we know this person, this name is not his birth name, but he is a monk when people call him 是 something, And I say that it's a little tricky. Last time I said they all have their names started the same as the name of the Buddha. It is not, Buddha is called the Shakyamuni. That is why all the monks' name starts with 是, but that is not why. I mean, Buddha is called the Shakyamuni not because he is a a monk, but because 释迦牟尼 is his own name, and because of his name, all the other monks in China, at least, have their last name named Shi. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is it's not because Buddha was a monk, so his name starts with Shi. It is because his name started with Shi. That's why other monks had their names changed into a name that starts with Shi. Okay? And the Shakyamuni is a translation of a Sikyamuni or something like that. Sometimes it's translated into SHA, so it's probably pronounced Shakyamuni instead of Sakyamuni. Anyway, that was his original name. And Muni seems to mean a wise man, and the Sakya or Shakya is his family name. However, I'm really not an expert in his name at all, so I don't know exactly what his name means or is. From what I found out, we call him Buddha or the Buddha, 就是佛祖的意思哈. And his name is Shakyamuni in China, Korea, Japan, and Tibet. All these countries have a large presence of the Buddhist religion in that country, and this branch of Buddhism is called Mahayana. 所以就是大乘佛教的国家里面，大家就叫佛祖释迦牟尼。可是小乘的就不是哈。In the countries, you look at the word in the parenthesis. Here we have the word Mahayana, and down the next line there's a word Theravada. I don't know if I pronounce it right. It could be Theravada, because almost all the TH in other countries are usually pronounced Te. Anyway, so there are more than two, but we always say there are two major branches of Buddhism. One is Mahayana and one is Theravada. 就是大乘跟小乘. And those countries like China, Korea, Japan, and Tibet, most of their Buddhist citizens are in the branch of Mahayana. While on the other hand, like Sri Lanka and some of the Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Vietnam, those countries, their Buddhism is a branch that is called the Theravada. And in those countries, they don't call Buddha Sakyamuni or Shakyamuni. They like to call him Siddhartha Gautama. I don't know why somebody say his last name is Gautama and some say his last name is Shakya. Anyway, those words are his family name, and his first name is probably Siddhartha. So, for example, there's a Nobel Prize winner, Hermann Hesse. He wrote a novel called Siddhartha. This is a story about Shakyamuni. Okay, so Siddhartha is the name that some other non-believers would usually say his name is Sakyamuni's name is Siddhartha. So, however, in those South Asian countries, they would call him Siddhartha Gautama, or they would call him they would call him Siddhartha Gautama. That's the way they commonly call the Buddha, while in China and the northern countries, we call him Shakyamuni. This is just a little thing I'm doing here, which is really not what I'm really am familiar with. Okay, let's go back to why we want to talk about the Napoleonic Wars. And this is because I was talking about C.S. Forester. He is an English novelist who wrote the novel that was turned into the movie The African Queen. That was the subject of our last class. And he is more famous for writing many other novels with a central figure, the protagonist of those novels. I think there were 12 of them. The protagonist, just the leading man in those novels, is Captain Horatio Hornblower. That is a naval commander of a warship or several different ships. I don't know how many. He is a captain of a warship that participated in the Napoleonic Wars. So that's why I talked about the Napoleonic Wars. And when I was talking about it, I mentioned that there was the Admiral Nelson. He happens to be called Horatio as well. Horatio Nelson, he was the naval commander who won the Battle of Trafalgar, and that is on the sea. So the British, let me see, the British, okay. I was trying to see what country England would belong to when Napoleon was around, and that was the British Empire, yes. Okay, it's after 1702, so it's called the British Empire. I was going to write something, now I forgot. Okay, I was going to say Nelson. He won the battle at Trafalgar. I like to look at my usual font. That's my habit, okay? Nelson won the big battle on the sea at Trafalgar, which is at the southwestern corner in the sea, of course, of Spain. So it's a little bit far from England, but that was where the battle on the sea was conducted. On the other hand, I had difficulty last time coming up with the word, the name of Wellington. Wellington, and he won the battle on land in Waterloo. In Chinese, we call that battle 滑铁卢. So when we say somebody met his fate of defeat, we say 惨遭滑铁卢, because in our time, maybe people nowadays don't say that anymore, but when we were younger, we sometimes would hear people say somebody met his destiny of defeat. We would say he 惨遭滑铁卢. This is a place in Belgium where Wellington raged a battle against Napoleon and won the very decisive battle that so they were able to defeat the entire French army and put Napoleon on St. Helena, the Isle of Shenhailun Dao. That's the end of Napoleon, because he was imprisoned on that island and he died there maybe 6 years later. He was first captured and sent to the island called Elba, but then he escaped and came back and won a series of battles, but in the end he lost to Wellington in 1815. That does it. That did it. He was gone forever since that war. Okay. and that this is a name that I forgot last time, Wellington, Duke of Wellington. He was 83 years old when he died. Of course, he's a very strong and powerful and very dignified person, you can see from this painting. And he is not only a good general or a soldier or whatever, let's say he's a general, I don't know, but he led the British Army and many other allied forces, and he won the decisive battle in Waterloo. And he was so beloved by the people that he served as a prime minister twice. So that is a very dignified career, both on the battlefield and in politics, just like Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower. He was a winning general in the World War II and is so beloved by his people in the United States that he was elected and re-elected as a president. So it's comparable, this comparison between Duke of Wellington and Dwight Eisenhower. And he led a lot of armies. A coalition means 联军, and defeated Napoleon in 1815. You can see that we call him an Anglo-Irish soldier. Ireland had been conquered by England since Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, 就是克林威尔, in 1649, Cromwell came to Ireland and swept throughout the island and conquered the island. And since then, it becomes a colony of Great Britain. Let me see, at that time it was not Great Britain, it was England, okay. Cromwell presided over a country that was called England. However, it was a joint country with Scotland. But after Cromwell, that was 1649, then some other kings came around, James and Charles. And in 1702, it was at Queen Anne's time that the country becomes the British Empire. So during Cromwell's time, we still call it, the country name is England. But Duke of Wellington was from Ireland, so he was a lower class people. He was from a colony that was occupied by England, but he did not keep saying he's Irish. He pretended to be an Englishman, and he adopted the English tradition and religion, which is Anglican Church instead of Catholic Church. So Duke of Wellington was able to sweep away his past as being an Irishman and just take over, assimilated into the society as an English person. And he was able to become twice the prime minister, which is unheard of for an Irish person, because he did not claim to be an Irish person. Yeah, he, from the point of view of an Irishman, Duke of Wellington was a traitor. You can say that, okay? And here is a picture I took on April 26 in 2013, the second time I was in London. And this is the grand entrance of Hyde Park. It has a big gate. And this gate is called the Wellington Arch. Wellington Arch. It has 拱门, 所以叫做 arch. If you look at this gate, and on the side, on the left-hand side of this gate, is a statue of the Duke of Wellington on a horse. On a horse, we call that statue a equestrian statue. When you have someone riding on a horse as a sculpture, then that's an equestrian. Let me find a place to write this one. Equestrian. It's an adjective, which means riding on a horse. And if you have seen a movie called Equus, that is from the Latin word horse. Okay, so that has Richard Burton as a psychiatrist, I think. Anyway, I'm just trying to show you how to say a statue of a person riding on a horse. You would say it's a Duke of Wellington equestrian statue. Okay. And where is this arch? It is here. Here we have Wellington Arch, and it's at the southeastern corner of Hyde Park. Hyde Park is a pretty big park in London, and at this corner, which is the northeastern corner, is the so-called the Speaker's Corner, where anybody can drag a soapbox, put it there, and step on the soapbox and deliver a speech. Whatever you say, you will not be arrested for violating the law or talking bad about the monarch or the politician or whatever. Free speech corner. Anyone can stand up there and make a speech. That is the Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. That's very famous. When I was there the first time, there was like 5 or 7 people making speeches, and most of them were talking about Jesus Christ. They want people to believe Jesus Christ, and they find it necessary to stand on the soapbox to deliver a speech. But the second time I was there, I couldn't find anybody. So I was in disbelief. I thought, how come there's no one here making any speech at all? I guess people are too busy or too happy about their lives to want to complain about something. Anyway, so this is a map of London, and over here, where the National Gallery is, there's a square called the Trafalgar Square with a big statue of Lord Nelson. So within a few steps, you have Lord Nelson on a big pedestal, very, very high, and the Duke of Wellington. Both of them, one did their greatest service to the country by defeating Napoleon. And this is the heart of London downtown. If you ever go to London for sightseeing, you have to come here, because this is the London Eye. That's a big Ferris wheel and a Big Ben and the Parliament, Westminster, and the 10 Downing Street is where the Prime Minister live. The residence of the Prime Minister is at 10 Downing Street. And this is St. James Park and the Buckingham Palace and the Green Park and Hyde Park and the Kensington Garden. This is very busy commercial stores like Harrods. Here we have Harrods. That's the biggest department store. And it used to be owned by Dodi Fayyad's father. And Dodi was the boyfriend of Princess Diana. And you have all those museums. This is called the Museum District. So, and don't forget, if you go to London, you have to go to the British Museum. Okay, so this is a map of it. And here is a picture also I took on the same day maybe not the same day, 2 days apart. I was there like 11 days. Yeah. So if you look at this is on the 26th. Okay, this is on the 25th. Okay, on 2 different days. And this is Lord Nelson here on top of a very, very high column. And this is another very famous tourist trap. This is the National Art Museum. And this down here are 4 panels of relief, bas relief sculpture of what Lord Nelson did. Here's a picture, a closer up picture. So you have 4 panels on this quadrangle thing, plinth, that's called this plinth. And you have 4 lions. I think they were metal lions. I think they were from Venice. I've heard that. And there are 4 big lions surrounding this plinth. Plinth is some kind of square stand. And there are many fountains with water and the statues. So this is a very nice place to have a picnic lunch. Let's come back to the topic that we meant to be engaged in a discussion. Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815. It's a series of major global conflicts pitting the French Empire and its allies, led by Napoleon I, against a fluctuating array of European states formed into various coalitions. So when you have a Lianjun and the war just lasts and lasts, then there will be people entering the coalition and leaving the coalition. And there may be many, like Britain and Portugal and Belgium and Germany and Russia and so on. And they may some of the time in this coalition and may at some other time leaving this coalition. But there was a group of opposing coalition. On the other hand, on the French side, there was the United States and Spain. So there are 2 big groups of powerful European countries, if you count the United States as a European country. America certainly consider it as a European country, I guess. Okay. And Napoleon, he became the first consul of France in 1799. We all know that French Revolution started in 1789, 1789, okay, 1789, and it was chaotic and lots of killing took place, and the people were just very, very, it's quite messy. And when finally Napoleon became the leader of the country 10 years after the revolution started, he began to work on organizing the finance and the bureaucracy and the army. He did a lot of work, and finally the country is becoming better and better. And he decided he wanted to invade other countries. He wants France to be strong and dominating. So he trained his soldiers and made allies, like I just mentioned, the United States and Spain. And he started to invade neighboring countries, and the biggest battle he ever won was in 1805, and he beat the Russo-Austrian army, 就是俄国和奥地利哈。When we talk about Austrian, that was later become Austrian-Hungarian Empire, 奥匈帝国. But Austrian was the the leading part of the Austrian-Hungarian empire, okay? So Russia and Austria came together to fight Napoleon, and they had a huge defeat in Austerlitz. Here's the word Austerlitz. It is now currently a place in Czech. We call that country Czech, the Republic of Czech now, but a while ago it was Czechoslovakia. And this battle was very important to the Russian, and they suffered a huge defeat. And if you ever read the Tolstoy's very long novel, War and Peace, in the beginning, they were just always talking about the Battle of Austerlitz, because they had a huge defeat there. So on the other hand, the French won the battle, and they had a bridge in Paris that is called Austerlitz, Pont du Austerlitz. So that to commemorate their glorious victory there. And in 1805, it was at the peak of Napoleon's career. He defeated Russia and Austria at Austerlitz, and but he lost to Lord Nelson. Admiral Horatio Nelson decisively crushed the Franco-Spanish Navy in the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. So Trafalgar is a strange name, but it is forever written in the British history. And as any tourist would know, there is a big Trafalgar Square in the center of London. And what does Napoleon want to do after that? He invaded Portugal, because on the entire continent of Western Europe, Portugal is the only one who sided with the British side. So Napoleon would invade Portugal, and he easily occupied Lisbon. So he won the war against Portugal, but his army was already on the Iberian Peninsula, 伊比利亚半岛. And he said, oh, I might as well invade Spain as well, even though Spain was his ally. France and Spain were allies for several years. And now, because Napoleon went to fight the Portuguese and won and occupied Lisbon, he turned around and invaded Spain. This is the story that we've heard many, many times. You have heard it from me. Every country we talk about on the continent of the Americas, whether it's Peru or Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, or Panama, or whatever, any country that used to be a Spanish colony, since Napoleon's invasion of Spain in 1807, all those countries agitated and started their independence movement. And in the end, around 1821 and 1822, all those Central and Southern American countries all became independent because of Napoleon. Because of Napoleon's invasion of Spain. Okay, that is a very important thing. So Napoleon put his brother to become king of Spain in 1808. So Spanish and the Portuguese, they came together to revolt against Napoleon with the support of the British army, and they were able to chase the French army out of Iberian Peninsula in 1814. However, by that time, the Spanish king has already gone and lost his throne. That's why in the next 5-10 years, all the American colonies became independent. That is one of the things that's very interesting because of Napoleon. At this time, Russia was not very happy being controlled by Napoleon. It's like right now, America says anyone who does business with Russia, we want embargo or sanction, trade sanction. We are imposing a trade sanction against against Russia, Putin. So all our allied countries, they should all not buy Russian things, especially the oil. At that time, Napoleon was having all the countries around him obeying his trade rules, not to deal with this other side. And Russia was not happy, and Russia wanted to have more trade with other countries. So he did not toe the line, did not follow Napoleon rules. That's why Napoleon decided to invade Russia, and to his great dismay, he lost tremendously in Russia because it was so cold. He started the war before winter, and throughout the winter, those French soldiers just could not function well in the severe cold of Russian climate. So the massive invasion of Russia in 1812 was a big failure. It's easy to remember the year 1812 because Tchaikovsky wrote an overture called the Overture of 1812. It is to celebrate the defeat of Russia's victory over Napoleon's French army. Okay, that's the year 1812. And after that, other countries all came up to fight the French, and they were successful and defeated Napoleon in 1813 in Leipzig, which is part of Germany. So all these countries defeated Napoleon, and what did they do? They put Napoleon on the Elba, on the Isle of Elba. Here's the word Elba. 厄尔巴群岛里面的一个岛. If you have read the story or watched the movie about the Count of Monte Cristo, 基督山恩仇记, 基督山伯爵的故事, there's a lot about Napoleon, about the island of Elba and the 100 days of Napoleon's reassuming control of France for about 100 days. There's actually a chapter in that book called 100 Days. So the Allied captured Napoleon and put in 1814, they put him on the island of Elba, but he escaped next year. And for 100 days, he took his army all the way into Paris and became the king or emperor again. Okay, then he was defeated in Waterloo and captured and put on the island of St. Helena, where he died 6 years later. Okay, All these stories, we don't have to know much about it, but we should realize that the great Napoleon, after all the things he did, his victories and defeat, he changed the world forever, at least for that part of the world, which is Western Europe. There are 5 things that we should really know that is the profound consequences on global history. First is that in the past, in the medieval times, or before French Revolution, the European countries are all tiny little ones, almost like each mountain is one country, especially in Italy and Germany. You have hundreds of little kingdoms within this. It's not a big country, it's just little kingdoms. But after that, they eventually became, you call it unification. Germany and Italy both became major big countries by uniting lots of little states within their territory. And that is because after Napoleon, the spread of nationalism and the liberalism, the 2 things. One is nationalism. Each country is more intensely aware that they should all come together and fight others who are not in their country. That's called the nationalism. If a country is weak and quite scattered about, then it's not good for the country to stay strong and to not be the victims of other neighboring countries. That's a time when the neighboring countries are so strong that if you're weak, you're doomed. So nationalism became the thing. It became so powerful that every country is for itself, but that nationalism became a bad word a couple hundred years later, because you really cannot be so strongly in favor of your own country at the expense of others around you. You should be kind to others, and together you can make better things happen instead of being always fighting against each other. And the other thing is liberalism, which more or less means not to obey to a dictator or a king or a monarch. People all have their thoughts and rights, and they should have their rights and have their say. So these are called the nationalism and the liberalism. The second thing that happened is the rise of Great Britain. The entire Europe continent was totally war ravaged because of constant wars for so many years with different allegiance and just chaos all the time. People are very, very tired. And Great Britain being outside the battleground, they also have the strength of their technology and naval power and the trade capability and so on. So Britain became the next superpower, taking over Spanish and many others, French, Germany, Belgium, Dutch. They all had their time being a superpower, but then it was Britain's turn to become the superpower until the Second World War. And the third one we already talked about, which is the independence movement in Latin America. All those colonies that once belonged to Spain and Portugal all of a sudden became independent because of Napoleon. The fourth thing is fundamental unification of German and Italian territories that we just talked about. They used to be a group of tiny kingdoms. Now they realize that together they can accomplish greater things. So there was Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm, Frederick Wilhelm, I guess. That's in Germany. And in Italy, you have Garibaldi and Cavour and King Emmanuel. King Emmanuel actually is the king of Sardinia, which is not on the continent of Italy. It's on an island next to Corsica. But this king was recognized. People loved him, and he did a good job consolidating the entire country of Italy and became the king of Italy. And the very last thing is more abstract. It is about how to conduct warfare, because so many battles were waged against each other. The skills and the technology, strategy, all these things about warfare got improved. Gunpowder was invented in the Song Dynasty in China. It took some time. Song Dynasty was like in the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. So gradually it spread to Central Asia and eventually to Western Europe. So they took time utilizing this new technology to make a very powerful weapon. And after tested in the battleground, you have to test it in battleground. Weaponry is not something that you can sit in the lab and just invent something without actually putting it into use on the battleground. So when you have large-scale battles actually happening, that's how you improve the warfare technique and the strategies and so on. On the other hand, also getting improved, it was the civil law, because of so many conflict and argument, and the law, the Department of Law, people's knowledge and the practice of law also got to be the opportunity to improve and become written into future laws. These are all the things that are really fundamentally earth-breaking, and it all happened because of one person whose name is Napoleon. And he died a shameful death alone on an island. And the entire Western Europe was totally shaken because of this experience. So they congregated in Vienna and had a Congress of Vienna, which is like a conference, an international conference after the war. After Napoleon was put away, they want to address how this happened, how to prevent things like this from happening again, and how we should draw the boundary, how to divide the country, and what monarch should we put on each throne. They systematically define each country's boundary and who to be their monarch. The entire Europe was one big royal family. They all marry each other's children and so on. So when one person was found to have a whole how do you call that? 血有病, I forgot the word. Hemophilia. Hemophilia, yeah. Hemophilia is just to be friend with the blood, which means that your blood does not coagulate or something. So once you have a wound, it'll keep on bleeding. So you will lose a lot of blood. That's called 血有病. And Queen Victoria does have that problem, but when it happens on a girl, a female descendant, it doesn't show. Only boys would exhibit this kind of syndrome, which is hemophilia. So when Queen Victoria was found to have this, that means all the bloodlines in Europe everywhere, they had the risk factor in their blood. And for example, the Tsar of Russia, I think it's Nicholas. Yeah, Nicholas, and Alexandra was his wife. So Nicholas and Alexandria was the Russian Tsar and the Tsaress, and they had a son who had hemophilia, and that was a very, very troublesome problem. And one of the reasons that empire perished was because of this son, and the queen was so stressed out with the son's hemophilia that she believed in a wacky doctor that is, what's his name? Somebody come up with that name. So the emperor would conduct his business, but the empress would be always want to listen to this doctor who could cure, but not really cure, who has a way of treating their hemophiliac son. So I have to come up with the name. Rasputin. Okay, Rasputin is the name. Rasputin is the doctor who always treated the Tsar's son who had hemophilia, and lots of people tried to kill him in many different ways, and he is just undying no matter how they kill him. They hit him on the head and poison him, and they hack his body, and they throw him in water. Of course, eventually he died, but he is like a undead person, okay? And he took the empire down by doing all these bad things, okay? We're talking about Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna and how Europe tried to fix the system, and they succeeded for several decades, but eventually it could not be sustained. In 1848, everywhere there was a revolution. People just don't want to be ruled by these bad monarchies everywhere. And there was a war between the countries. That's Crimea War, which by definition is a war between Russia and Great Britain. And they fought in Crimea, which is south of Ukraine right now. That happened in 1853. Okay, let's start with the vocabulary. These two words, attribute and accolade, we were going to talk about them last time, but we did not have the time. So attribute is kind of abstract. You can say that this thing has all these attributes, 就是说它的有些什么特点哈。And you can also say all these attributes actually defines or represents it exclusively. What I mean is the concept in mathematics as 充分, sufficient, and how do you say that? Okay, so we say that a white horse is a horse, but a horse is not necessarily a white horse. So the white horse is a horse that is white. Huh? So you can say this thing has two tributes. One is a horse, one is white. These are the two things. So if you talk about Jove or Jupiter or Zeus, who is a god in heaven in Greek mythology, then he has two things that represent him. Of course, he's a big God that controls and rule over the world. But there are two things that represents him. One is an eagle and one is a bolt of lightning. So those are the two attributes of Jove or Jupiter. And whenever they have a picture of him or a statue of him, you can see that there's an eagle maybe standing next to him, or a bolt of lightning. Bolt of lightning 就是一个闪电的那个样子。A statue usually has a bolt of lightning on top of Jove or Jupiter. So these are his attributes, and that's a characteristic or quality of his thing. Here's an example that says, his finest attribute is his kindness. 这个人他的最好的个性的最好的地方就是他的慈善的心，所以他的 attribute 是他的 kindness 是他的一个 attribute. And as a representative of this character, we have the eagle and the bolt of lightning that are attributes of Jove. So I just said it's a little bit tricky because it's not a solid thing, this attribute. The word is a kind of abstract. If we use it as a verb, then we could say, for example, the last line that says, this poem is attributed to Browning, which means that we have a poem here. And who wrote it? People say it was Browning who wrote it. So it was attributed to Browning. 大家认为他是属于 Browning. Robert Browning 是一个British poet. To ascribe something to a given cause or reason, we can attribute something as a cause of something, or we can associate the ownership or authorship to someone. In these two ways, we use this word, or the verb attribute. Okay, another word is accolade. This is a little bit tricky too, because it could mean two things that we really commonly use this word in two ways. One is praise and one is an award. So you can praise somebody, say wonderful things about this person. You're expressing an approval. So that's what you're doing to praise. You can say that's your accolade. On the other hand, we can say accolade is a solid item, something that is a thing. Okay, this thing is an award. So whether it's an Oscar or 金马奖 or whatever, these are awards. So this accolade is not just empty words. It is actually one thing that you give to somebody to award him, that to acknowledge his achievement. So it can be an abstract thing, which is a praise, or which it can be a solid item, which is an award given to somebody. Okay. And the next word is electric grid. A grid is this is like a 围棋盘, the board of Go, G-O, Go game, the game of Go. You do it on a grid of little squares on a board. And because this is a grid, we could call electric grid or power grid or the grid to mean the entire system of transmitting electricity from the source all the way into your home, to your appliance. This entire system, including the power plant, all the storage and the station, the transmission, those lines that distribute to other faraway places, and the substations that would change the voltage from high to low, and then to align to each each one's home. The entire electric grid is the whole thing, that's including all the things that we just mentioned. Right now, because electricity is so very important, you just cannot live your life for an hour without electricity. So this is becoming so important, and the technology has developed so that the system can send electricity to very far away places. Usually we say, for example, in Taiwan, you have your power from 电信局, okay? However, in Europe or in America, it's not just in your state or in your city. Your power can come from Canada or Mexico, and they all have a way of sending it down to very far away places. So this has become very important and a very powerful thing. And the bad people would want to sabotage, which means if someone wants to paralyze a country, they could just sabotage their electric grid. So the security becomes very important. And especially nowadays, all these transmission was controlled by all kinds of, computers. So it's so easy to do something far away and cause a huge hazard somewhere else. So cybersecurity is very important. And this word is suckle, where we talk about this word when we saw the picture of a she-wolf, 就是一个母的狼, breastfeeding two babies, twins, who became the founder of the city of Rome. So this word is called the suckle, which means the baby sucking milk from a mother's breast. This is usually we call it breastfeeding or nursing. Nurse is taking care of a patient or a baby, but nursing is also used to mean to breastfeed. Then comes the word mammal. Mammal means 哺乳类, the word M-A-M-M something means breast. You take a X-ray called a mammogram of the breast in order to find out if there's cancer in the breast. And the similar word with M-A-M-M, but became longer as a mammalian. It is an adjective, which means something related to a mammal, 哺乳类的, And you nurse or breastfeed or suckle to drink the milk, but as a baby, sooner or later, you will be weaned to regular food. So you were used to suckle on breast milk, but then your mother or your caretaker started to feed you regular food. In the beginning, it's all mashed up, and then gradually you can eat solid food. That is the process of weaning a baby from milk to solid food. So wean means to 断奶的意思. The doctor tried to wean her off the sleeping pill. That is an extension use of the word wean, because this has nothing to do with the milk. It is that a patient may be taking sleeping pills too regularly, too reliant on taking sleeping pills to fall asleep. So the doctor tried to wean her off, which means to break the habit of taking sleeping pills. Another example is I was weaned on the regular diet of Hollywood fantasy, which means this person is regularly watching Hollywood movies, which is not real. So it becomes his or her regular diet. But it's not a diet, it's not eating, it's not food, but it's a watching movie. So it's just figuratively speaking, not literally speaking about weaning and dieting. This word is called moat. In America, we call it moat, but in British English, we call it moat, M-O-U, with an U there. Huh? Lots of words in America, we spell it with O, and in British language, you would add an U there, such as color or harbor. We would all take out that U. Huh? Here we have moat. Moat means an animal, usually an animal, shed the outer layer of skin in order to become a different thing, like a butterfly, or to become a bigger thing, like a snake or a cicada. So all these animals, they have an outer shell of some kind. It could be skin, hair, feather, fur, wool, or any other skeletons. We say exoskeleton, which means 像一个节肢动物哈，节肢动物我们说是 invertebrate 哈，它呢没有骨头，而它的骨头是在外面的，所以叫做 external exoskeleton， 就是说它的骨头在它的 body 外面的，他们可能会把那个脱掉而变成里面的出来哈。This is called molting. It can happen because of specific times of the year. For example, a rabbit may have white fur in the winter, so it can walk about and the other animals, predators, cannot see well. But when summer comes, this rabbit could shed the white fur and have brown fur, then it's easier to hide. So this is a seasonal thing that the rabbit would change the fur when the season changes. And there are other times, not because of the season of the year, but because the cycle of an animal. For example, we all raised a silkworm when we were young, and the silkworm would sleep several times, I guess 3 times during the lifetime. Every time it would just not move. So we say 缠绵, huh? And as a butterfly, caterpillar, 一个毛虫呢, it could go through several molting, huh? It could become bigger and bigger every time by getting out of a previous shell, such as a crab or a hermit crab, things like that. They could throw away a skin or something and become bigger, or they could throw away the cocoon or the, how do you say that? How do you say a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis? Chrysalis, I guess it is. Okay, oh, I forgot to delete this. I was trying to say the word chrysalis. Okay, there's chrysalis and there is a cocoon, huh? These are 2 different words for 茧, huh? If you are a moth, or a silkworm. We all see silkworm. It spin the silk and make a cocoon, and they stay in that cocoon until they become something else, which is a moth. So when they came out of the cocoon, they are a different thing. You could not imagine how that happened. But if you are a butterfly, it's not called a cocoon. It's called a chrysalis. And it becomes a butterfly. There are two kinds of butterflies. Okay. Next time when I continue to talk about Costa Rica, we're going to go to several butterfly gardens, and I will talk about these two things in more detail. So here we're just talking about molting. So we're not specifically talking about caterpillars, but molting means to shed the skin or feather. And in this case, the snake would shed its skin, and the crab would shed its shell. And here we have cicada. Cicada would has an opening on the back. It opens, and a new cicada would come out of it, which is bigger. And they would also shed their wings together with the shell. And the cicada shells are used as a kind of medicine, herbal medicine in Chinese tradition. And this kind of insect that has strong bones outside their body instead of inside, they are called the exoskeleton, which means the skeleton, 骨头, exo means outside. So exoskeleton, for example, the cicada, or other like praying mantis or grasshopper, they are all called the 节肢动物, arthropods. That's a word of molting. And now that's a word called the usurp, which means to, by force, you claim the power which is not legally yours. You are not the heir of a king, but you may be some powerful general or somebody. You declare that this king is out of the throne, and you become the king. That is called usurp, 就是篡位的意思. To usurp is to claim to power in an illegitimate or controversial way. Illegitimate has IL put in front of the word legitimate. Legitimate is the word that means 合法. So illegitimate 就是不合法. Sometimes you would put IL in front of that, or IR, depending on what the first letter is. This is a very long word. People are tired of saying legitimate, so they would shorten it to legit, L-E-G-I-T. When somebody say legit, it's not a real original word. It means legitimate, which means legal. Illegitimate 就是说不合法的方式来夺权. Controversial 就是没有按照规矩来的. So you can take over the power of a country or a city or a region or whatever without any formal or legal right. You don't have the right to do that, and you insist on doing it. That's called the usurp. Here I was talking about India, independence of India, but the history of India is very complicated and very long. India has a history that is longer than China's. Lots of Chinese thought our country has a very long history, the longest history, but no, China does not have the longest history in the world. You can count on your fingers. Many countries that have longer history, but China came right after all of them. Okay, there are countries in India, Egypt, or Iraq, or Persia, or maybe not Persia. Persia is about China's age. And so you have a group of countries that are older than China, including India is older than China. And we're not going to talk about all these very complicated history, but we come to the end of it. At 7.4, we have East India Company ruled in India, which is the British trading company. They are an Indian import-export company that got so huge that they have their own apparatus to do what a real country can do. So they came to India and took over the country in the name of the British Empire. However, they are just a commercial company, a corporation. They ruled India for a time until an uprising came and the British Empire decided to step in. So that from that day on forward in 1857, it was the real British Empire who came to India to do the administration and everything else. And so you talk about the independence movement of India, you will look at when East India Company came and what happened at the uprising, and later the colonial rule of the British Empire over India. This part is the part that deals with the independence movement. And the reason that I want to talk about it is because of a movie that I want you to go out and find. This movie. It's called RRR, and it's a new movie. It was produced this year, and we have it deals with Indian independence, which has two parts. The first part is before 1858. That was a rule of 100 years by a company, a corporate who came to India and became the boss for 100 years. And then for another 90 years, it was the real British Crown who came here. And then this period is called the British rule, or British Raj, or British Crown as the ruling party. And the defining moment was in 1858, which for 100 years, it was called the Indian Mutiny. Because you're talking from the point of view of the British Empire. They think that little India was under our control, under our company control for 100 years, and they dare to mutiny against us. But if you are on the Indian side, of course, it is your natural right to rise against the British rule. That is, it's very funny to call Indian uprising Indian mutiny, because the mutiny means 叛舰夺血记, 叛舰喋血记. Okay, and that's called mutiny. In the British mind, mutiny is horribly wrong. It's illegal. It should never happen. That's called a mutiny. That's what they call the Indian mutiny. But after 100 years, almost 100 years, people, especially Indian people, objected to this name. So nowadays, not too many people still use the word mutiny about the riot in 1858 that caused the Indian to rise against British rule, but they did not succeed. So this movie is about two heroes of the independence movement in the 1920s. If you look at 1920, you know that India was became independent in 1947. That's 2 years after the Second World War. So they were a bit earlier than the real independence, which was led by Gandhi. I would recommend you to watch the movie Gandhi, but it was free on YouTube for a while, but no longer so. So I decided not to use that. But it really gives you a very good idea of what's happening there in a very short time, like 4 hours, okay? So this is like a superhero movie. In our Chinese view, it's a kung fu movie, which our media, Chinese movies and TV series and the novels, we found a kung fu movie or 武侠小说 very early on, and our especially TV series are full of kung fu episodes, which did not happen in any other country until much later. And once they found out this entertainment value of Chinese kung fu movie, they started to have superhero movies, and this one is a superhero movie about Indian independence. It's all made up. They took 2 real-life people who have never met in their lives, and they imagine the story of how they come together to rise against the British rule. So it's a Indian feel-good superhero movie. You see impossible fighting, like flying, and lots of technical things that does not happen in real life. So it was really fun to watch, and it sold very well, broke many box office records. It's called RRR, which means Rise, Roar, Revolt. And then we talk about voodoo. Voodoo, actually, we talk about zombies. Zombies were, in theory, caused by voodoo magic. That is, people die, and those voodoo masters, let me see what's the name for it, Walker. I saw it here, okay. Anyway, we will find the word later, B-O-K-E-R or C-O-R. Anyway, let me see where at the previous one. Voodoo. Voodoo is a kind of a magic, black magic. That is, you can do something which is not real and be able to, for example, you would put a needle in a doll, with the doll meaning a person you hate, and every day you stab that doll, and that person would feel the pain and eventually die. That's a kind of voodoo that's often being practiced. And it originated in Africa, in Western Africa. Here we say they were from Benin, Togo, and Ghana, and Nigeria. That's a cluster of small countries on the middle western part of Africa. And these neighborhood is, most of the Black slaves were kidnapped from this area and shipped to Europe and America to be slaves. Because of this action, a lot of this voodoo art or religion moved to Europe and Americas as a result. So this West African religion survived slavery and evolved into the current form of religions with similar names. They are all called some kind of a name that's close to voodoo, because they follow slaves from, well, they were free men in Africa, but they became slaves in Americas, and those practitioners brought this kind of magics to the entire Americas. There are Haitian voodoo, Louisiana voodoo, Cuban voodoo, Dominican voodoo, Venezuelan, and the Brazilian. So almost the entire Americas had slaves who came from Western Africa and brought their religion and magic practice to Americas. Here we have the word diaspora, which means this group of people left their original country and now live in a foreign country. And African diaspora is such kind of diaspora. You have Irish diaspora, you have Chinese diaspora, like where we do at 健安疗养院 or 健安 how do you call that now? And we used to call ourselves 银发族, 亚裔银发族. All these organizations happen because there's a diaspora there of foreigners who came from the same country, and they establish a community, and they still practice the custom and say their language or celebrate their holidays. That's the idea of a diaspora. It's a community of people who are away from one country and now live in a different country. That's called a diaspora. Then from this voodoo came the thing about zombie. Zombie or ghoul or living dead or walker or walking dead. All these are dead people who were made to become animated or active. Zombie is a mythological undead created through reanimation of a corpse. Corpse 是死尸 How do you reanimate a corpse? That sounds impossible, and it is actually impossible, but some kind of magic could cause that to happen. And that magic could be voodoo. But nowadays, when you see a movie or TV story or whatever, it's not because these dead people were made alive by magic. They are usually because some kind of disease or radiation or some kind of parasite or scientific accident, all kinds of strange things that are not real. So those are science fictional, not magic. And here is a Mr. or probably a Dr. Wade Davis, who works as a Harvard ethnobotanist. And you have the word ethnobotanist. There's a botanist, which is a person who does 植物学, botany. And the beginning of the word is ethno, which means tribal or ethnic or racial or something. So he studies different tribes or different cultures, botany. That's an ethnobotanist. And his research shows that there are two special powders that the voodoo doctor would use in order to induce a body to move. One kind of powder is the same kind as a pufferfish stomach. 我们说拼死吃河豚 there is a very deadly toxin inside the stomach of pufferfish. That's what the Japanese would eat. They have skilled butcher who would kill the fish very expertly so that the poison does not leak out to the meat, the fish meat that the customer is going to eat. So this is one kind of powder, tetradotoxin, toxin. Okay, another kind is a delirium, which means causing people to hallucinate. Delirium 就是产生幻觉的一种 drug, such as datura. Datura is a kind of 曼陀罗. We call that angel's trumpet, or what's another name? Brugmansia. And in our story, we have 水浒传, in which you can say bad people use 曼陀罗 to drug their customers. They sell 包子 made of 人肉, human, how do you say that? Anyway, they would, you would go there and eat the baozi, and then you became unconscious. Then they took your body and make your flesh into the next batch of baozi. That is a 蒙汗药 used in 水浒传, which is from a kind of flower belonging to Datura family. So this Harvard scientist, he went there to Haiti to do some research, and he found out that there are two kinds of poison or toxins that were used to cause a dead body to become animated, and they're from one from pufferfish and one is from datura. But other scientists do not trust that his research was correct. Especially he claims that here was the word I was looking for, Bokor, B-O-K-O-R, and it can be spelled in some other way. That means a practitioner of voodoo magic. And he claims that those Bokors could induce a dead body to become walking for years and years, and other scientists could not possibly believe him, because even if you succeed for a short time, it doesn't mean for years. It's very hard to make that happen. But that's his research in the 80s of the last century. Here I found a list of countries with most people in diaspora. We would think that Chinese would have diaspora everywhere in the whole world. In my experience, anywhere you go, no matter how small the town, there is a Chinese restaurant opened by some Chinese long ago who came from China. But despite the large number of population in China, China has the largest population in the whole world. There are 10 million people in diasporas all over the world, which ranked in this list the number 4. The country with the greatest number of people outside their country is India, almost twice as many as Chinese people. All the other countries on this list, they have far less population. So it's amazing how they could top China in the number of people in diaspora. The second one was Mexico. Third one is Russia. And China is number 4. And after that, you have Bangladesh, Dongbajistan, Syria, Syria, Pakistan, Ukraine, Philippines, and the United Kingdom. We often talk about the diaspora in, say, America of Irish or Polish descendants, but they were nowhere close in number when you compare to these 10 countries. Okay, I need to be fast. Okay, convoy is the Huang, so it's often more militarily equipped, either a plane or a ship, trying to protect a group of other ships or cars. because they have strong military presence, so they could protect these, like in this picture. This is a heavy airplane thing that could guard this group of ships to cross the ocean safely. This is called a convoy. This word we don't use anymore because this equipment is not in use anymore. But in the old days, in medieval times, when you want to attack your enemy inside a city wall, it's very hard to send the arrows into that city or other weapons. So they have this kind of contraption, putting a huge rock and somehow throw it, 用这种杠杆原理, a cantilever type spring, and throw big heavy payload into the city wall. That's a catapult. Often when we go to a foreign country, especially those medieval towns with fortress around the town, you can see they have this kind of a model from old days or reconstructed thing that are outside the city wall. But the first one I saw was in Egypt, probably in Cairo. Yes, in Cairo. And so this is a kind of thing that throws a projectile, 一个飞行的一个物体, very far away, but not using gunpowder or nuclear power or whatever. But it's a very ancient kind of weapon. And the theory is they could throw a thing so far away because of a spring or a bow or twisted rope or elastic or other things, mechanical. And that thing, a spring, for example, could be winded very tight, and then suddenly upon release, it would exert a very strong force. And this is private investigator, so it can be called the private eye, or you can spell it as EYE, which means PI. And I also mentioned the gumshoe, which means though they wear shoes, the bottom of the shoe, which is called the sole, S-O-L-E, 鞋底, is rubber, so they can walk comfortably and quietly. So these are the private detectives. And when the person is cantankerous, it means 脾气不好, ill-tempered, cranky. Cranky means not smooth or serene or calm. Crabby, somehow people think crabs are ill-tempered. So crabby is 像螃蟹一样的坏脾气. Quarrelsome means that you very prone to get into argument and like to fight with people. And skipper is the more casual word for captain. It's a master of a ship, but the ship is usually smaller, not a huge one. Then you can also use it in the sports. You can have football, cricket, rugby, or curling. And there are teams, and the leader of a team, or a sports team, can be called a skipper. And spinster is an old maid, a woman who passed the marriageable age and still not married. And they usually are spinsters. They would spin the yarn to make a garment in the old days. So they are called the old maid, and they use the word spinster. Spinster nowadays is also used to mean to tell a story in a favorable way for political purpose. So if you have a candidate who's running for a position and he may or may not have a past that are not so pure or innocent, or anything that he said which is not very good or adequate or proper, then the people around him would put a spin on the story. So these people are called spinsters. They would take the material of a story and spin it so that it becomes better. For example, if he I cannot make an example. It is just maybe he said something not so good, and then his spinsters would describe it in a better way so that people thought, oh, okay, that's pretty good. So these people are called spinsters too. This is a little rarely used, epitome or epitome. That is like the word attribute. You have certain things that are what this person embodied, and this person could embody a whole group of people, and he's the best in that group. So we could say he's the epitome of this group. For example, it can mean exemplar, which means 榜样. Model 也是个榜样, type, exemplar, model. Okay, these are the same thing. Okay, I need to delete those. So not only representative of this group, but he's the best in that group, the height, the best, the most vivid of that group. A brief summary of a text. So if it's a 文章的话, a simple summary of that can be called an epitome. And for a verb, you can use epitomize. Here we have epitomize. That's a verb of it. And megalomania is he's so proud and confident of himself. He thinks he's so powerful and more wealthier and stronger and than anyone else. So he has this fantasy about himself as being omnipotence. Omnipotence means 万能的意思哈。Omni 就是 every way 哈 ，potence 就是 strong 哈，这就是万能的这个字在这里 omnipotence. I don't know how the omnipotence. Okay, so a person who thinks so highly of himself is called a megalomania, and it's more or less a delusion. It's not really so, but he thought so. It's 神经病, huh? Okay. And there are two kinds of thinking very good about oneself. One is narcissism, which means a person who loves him too much. This is from Greek mythology. There was a god who's Narcissus. He loved he likes the look he has. So he was staying by the water and looking at his own image every day, every night. And eventually he became Narcissus, which is daffodil, 就是水仙花。水仙花这个字呢，就是从一个Greek god 来的哈，他的名字叫 Narcissus. He who's in love with his own beauty so much that eventually he became the 水仙花 by the water. And there's a difference of between 自恋 and 自大. 自恋 is narcissism, while 自大 is megalomania. 自大is not just only likes himself so much, but he thinks that he is so much more powerful than everyone else. So a megalomania, a person who is like that, is necessarily a narcissist. narcissistic person, but not the other way. Someone who loves his own look may not be megalomaniac. Okay, here's a picture of this Narcissus. Of course, he was not born in 1597, but this painting was painted by Caravaggio in 1597 of the Greek god who loves himself. Who loves how he looks himself, that he would never leave the water because that's where he could enjoy looking at himself. So he is in love with his own reflection. Reflection 是在水里反射出来的。And this word is called the euthanasia, 安乐死. It's a practice of intentionally ending life to eliminate pain and suffering. When the person is really sick and feeling pain and not being able to do anything else, the new thinking is that we should allow him the dignity to end his life so that he doesn't suffer as much. In the past, the people think life is sacred, and any way to end a life is not allowed by God if you are religious. And the new thinking is that a human has the right to keep their dignity and to choose to die if it is better, if he feels that's better. Okay, that's called the euthanasia. I think eu is means good, like eugenics 是优生学. And here I have a map of all the countries in the world. The red ones means it's illegal to either commit suicide or to let a doctor or someone help you to die. And the dark blue ones are area where it is legal to choose to die and for the doctor to help a person to do that. But in light blue is passive euthanasia is legal. That means you can refuse to be treated and you can disconnect all the tubes you are connected with. So, or the doctor can do that. There are two different levels. The dark blue ones is that you really can actively help people to take poison or to do something else to die. But the light blue ones is just to let you die, not by killing you. And the gray ones is maybe illegal or not regulated, but the dark burgundy color means that it's really illegal to do that, to do any of these things. So those countries are really in the minority. You have Kenya and Russia, and this area near Russia. The little one there, okay. There's the little one here, that's Kaliningrad, which is also part of Russia, but it's outside Russia. And over here you have, I think that's Ukraine. So this is also the Chechnya and so on, those states that are associated with Russia. So all these are Russia, all these. Not a single country is not Russia. Okay, so that is Russia. But this is different, This is Kenya. There is a Belize or something here, yes. That's about it, yeah. So we come to the part about the Ozymandias. It's a poem by Shelley. Shelley's first name is Percy. So it's common to say Percy Shelley, but the middle name is not very common to be pronounced in one breath, and it's Bysshe. Percy Bysshe Shelley. And I gave you all these links, and some has lyrics. I prefer finding ones with lyrics when we sing a song, but this is not really a song. And you have famous people like John Gielgud, and the last one is Vincent Price. They are actors who have a commanding voice, so they read it really well, but they don't have any lyrics accompanying on the video. And the middle three are all read by Bryan Cranston. And the second and the third one or animation, 就是卡通哈. So you do have lyrics to go with the text. So I prefer you watch the third and the fourth. But of course, you can watch any one or all of them. Bryan Cranston is an actor who happens to have read it to do a recording, and people loved it so much that they made 2 animated versions to go with it. So you can enjoy either one of them. Cartoon has the freedom to produce images that are not humanly possible. So that's interesting. I'm not going to show any of those links, but you can just click one of those links. It said, well, maybe I can show you. I met a traveler from an antique land, which means Egypt, who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. In the vast desert, there were 2 legs without pants. And the head fell off of that statue. Near them on the sand, you have a head. This visage is the head, the face that is broken, shattered, and sunk into the sand. But you can still see his eyebrows. 他皱着眉头哈, with frown and the wrinkled lips. That means 口嘴巴这样皱起来哈. Showing the expression of sneer of cold command, 冷冷的命令的口气，而且还带着一点怎么说 sneer， 好像嗤之以鼻的那种态度来讲这句话，这样讲话的一个雕像啊。Tells that its sculptor well those passions read。这个表情呢，让你知道他的这个雕刻家非常了解他的这个 passion， 他的这个感情雕刻的多么的好哈。Which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. Okay, this is more complicated. Maybe you should just go read it. Okay, this is very vividly describing the thing, huh? And this is a 14行诗, so there are 14 lines, and we just read 8 of them, huh? And then followed by another 4 and 2 more lines. That makes 14 lines. So a 14-line poem is called a sonnet, S-O-N-N-E-T, and it has 3 quatrains, which means it has 3 parts that each has 4 lines. Quatrain 就是4个句子，中文我们叫绝句哈。And then the end was 2 lines. The last 2 lines make a summation, 就是总结它的结论哈。And on the pedestal, those words appear. You could see that it's a broken statue, and on the pedestal on which the statue used to stand, and now it's fallen. On this fallen pedestal, you can read, it says, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." 这个是这个 pedestal 上面写的字哈。My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings 哈。Look on my works, ye mighty 哈。你不管你有多么的 mighty 哈，就是有权有势 ，just look at what I did and despair 哈，你就只好望洋兴叹，或者说你就完全比不上我的这个成就，所以你只好绝望了哈。Nothing beside remains 啊，除了这个东西，这两句话以外 ，nothing else remains of this statue. Round and decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and the level sands stretch far away. 啊，这最后这个是他的结论，说，around the decay of that colossal wreck 啊，这个巨大的破碎的雕像的附近呢，到处都是碎片，而这些碎片呢是孤零零的在那里，而是在这个一望无际的沙漠里面啊。He is describing this King of Kings in his heyday. At the peak of his power, he thought there's nothing that can compare with him. And now his statue is broken and scattered on the deserted desert. And obviously, he's no longer powerful. And whatever power he had has gone forever, never to come back. This is a very short poem and very, very 让人家感触哈。It makes you feel how things eventually, the most mightiest of all things can become nothing. The impermanence of life and achievement. Okay, now this is one of the statues that he was talking about. There are many, many statues of Ramses, and the one that he heard the traveler talk about was scattered about in the desert. But this is one that when Shelley wrote this poem, this was on the way from Egypt to be shipped to the British Museum. And this is a king, Egyptian king, who used to be called Ramses II. But at that time, they used his Greek name. The British called him Ozymandias, which is his Greek name. And now at that ancient time, maybe he was called Ramses, but nowadays we also call him Ramses. But for a shorter time in history, he was called Ozymandias. And if you have seen the movie, The 10 Commandments, and the character played by Yul Brynner was Ramses II. That's the same king. However, that story, which came from the Bible, could not be corroborated by history. If you read history, they did not mention Ramses. I mean, of course, they mentioned Ramses, but they did not say Ramses met Moses and did all these things to the Jewish people. It's not in the history, the real history, but it was in the Bible, in the Old Testament. I think the second book of Old Testament is Exodus, and that was a story about Moses who fought the king, the Pharaoh Ramses II. And in history, we know that he was the king from 1279 to 1213 BC. That was over 1,000 years before Christ. And he was a mighty, mighty king who built the pyramids, at least one of the pyramids, and other temples. And here, I just mentioned there are many statue of Ramses, and this one in particular has 4 Ramses statues sitting in a row, and this is in Abu Simbel. On the map on the left, you can see at the very bottom, north of the border with Sudan, there's a place with 3 red dots. If you look at my cursor, I'm sorry, I am here. Okay. My cursor is here, okay? And this is a spot of Abu Simbel upstream on Nile River. And this is a tomb where supposedly Ramses II was buried inside. And on the outside, there's a door right in the middle of the 2 pair of statues. And if you walk through that door, you can go into the chambers. There are several chambers and lots of carvings and throne and so on and so forth. And this is in Abu Simbel. It's a tomb of Ramses II with 4 of his statues. His wife's statue is next to this thing. I think it's on this side, on the right-hand side, much smaller. If you watch the movie, as I did many times, this is Charlton Heston playing Moses and Yul Brynner playing Ramses II. This is a very famous movie, and the 3rd actor in this movie, Anne Baxter, who's the female, plays the wife of the king, and so she is Queen Nefertiti. And in the movie, she's in love with Moses, but who knows? There's no history about them, about this love affair, okay? Ozymandias is a sonnet, S-O-N-N-E-T. So it has 14 lines, 我们叫做14行诗, and Shakespeare famously wrote over 100 of them. I think it's 156 or 165, one of those things. So Shakespeare wrote about 150 of the sonnets. He's very famous as a sonnet writer. But here, Shelley chose to write in the similar manner. This format is just like Lin Jiangxian is a kind of format. It tells you how many lines, how many syllables, and how each rhyming word should be. So sonnet is a kind of a 词牌 for the English poets. This was published in 1818. And he wrote it as a competition with his friend Horace Smith. They agreed to each write a poem, which is called Ozymandias, about this statue, because they heard that this famous statue is on the way to be shipped to the British Museum. And I don't know anybody can tell me what the other poet's poem was, but everybody knows about Ozymandias. It's almost the most famous poem of Shelley. It's so easy to read and understand. Many of the English poets, they write poetry very, very long, hundreds and hundreds or pages and pages of poems. But this one is really short and sweet. And he get his message across very clearly. The poem explores the fate of history and the ravages of time. 时间可以让什么都消磨掉了. Even the greatest men and the empires they forge are impermanent. Nothing is permanent. They are impermanent. Their legacies fated to decay into oblivion. 他不管他的传承多么的伟大的成就，都注定要腐朽，而且被遗忘。Decay into oblivion. Oblivion 就是被遗忘的意思了。So at that time, somebody found a statue, a broken statue, and it was removed. Well, actually, it was from probably this Abu Simbel place, or at the temple of Ramses at Thebes. So it was in one of the Karnak temple or Luxor temple. There are many, many temples. I don't know which one it came from. And Abu Simbel at the border, at the bottom of the map, is a new location for that funerary monument, because they were going to build an Aswan dam on the river, on Nile River, and they're going to flood a large area, a large section of the river, to create a lake, as it happens all the time all over the world, like Shimen Shuiku or Zhengwen Shuiku, whatever. And we living in Washington State, we see that happen all the time. As long as they want to build a hydroelectric dam, they would block the river flow and create a lake behind it. And as this matter of flooding the Nile River to build a Aswan dam, necessarily they need to move one of the temples to a higher ground. So they eventually cut it into a million pieces and reassembled it somewhere upstream in Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel is the name of a tour guide who probably accompanied Carter or somebody, those archaeologists who did all those excavation. That was a local guide for that archaeologist. So they eventually named this new place Abu Simbel. Okay. Shelley was born in 1792 and died at age 29. Short, a couple of months short of 30 years old. He's a major English romantic poet, and he has radical ideas. His poetry is radical, and his political and his social ideas are also radical. So people did not like him. For example, he's always saying there's no God, and he wrote essays about atheism, which means 无神论, So, and he does not believe in man and woman getting married. He did not want to see people getting married. He himself, well, he was married, but then he had a girlfriend, and he did not want to marry his girlfriend, but the girlfriend's father insists that they marry, so he had to marry. So he got all kinds of unconventional ideas. As a result, many people hated him very much. And he wrote brilliant essays and poems, but he did not become famous when he was alive. All these accomplishments were confirmed much later after he died. Now he became one of the very, very respected poets, but when he was alive, he was not doing well. He's always poor, having no money, even though his father could be rich, or his wife's father could be rich, but they would not give money to him because he did not do the right thing according to the parents' idea. So he was very poor, even though he came from a rich family with aristocratic pedigree. He became an important influence to the future poets, and he's pretty mild-mannered according to this portrait. This portrait was done in 1829 after he died. He's got all kinds of problems in his life, sickness, and many people hated him and wish he was dead. And he's always touting views that people did not like, and he was defiant， 就是对这个权威他有这个抗拒性哈。He went into permanent self-exile in Italy. So he went to Italy in 1818. That was like 26 years old. And over the next 4 years, wrote many wonderful poetry of the Romantic period. Okay, I just mentioned that he had the first wife, but then he had a girlfriend, and he took his girlfriend to Italy when he went to Italy. And he did not marry the girlfriend at that time. And later his wife committed suicide in Hyde Park. Hyde Park that we just talked about. His wife, Shelley's wife, first wife, committed suicide there. And after that, he did not want to marry, but he was forced to marry his second wife. And his second wife was famous for being the author of Frankenstein. Frankenstein is a story about a doctor, a curious doctor who wants to do research, and he made a dead body alive by his surgical magic. He created a live body from a dead body, and this person became a monster because he was so lonely and nobody liked him, and he looked ugly with all those scars. So he became very angry, and he wanted to kill everybody. Especially he wanted to kill Frankenstein, who is the master who did the surgery on him. And it's a horror story. It's horrible. You may have seen several movies about Frankenstein, but they were not the true versions, not according to Mary Shelley. It was a horrible story. Yeah, it was very well written and not too long. You can read it, and there's a newer version, I think maybe 10 years old, a stage production of Frankenstein in a more faithful version of the story with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee something. Anyway, the two of them on stage every day, switching roles. One day, Cumberbatch would be playing the doctor, and the next day, he would be playing the monster. The two of them both played both roles. It was fantastic. Yeah. It was on the National Theater. Anyway, we are talking about he had a troubled life. All kinds of things happened, and he died young at age 29 in a boating accident. And I just mentioned that some people really hated him, and one of them wrote an article after he heard about the accidental death, boating accident. He says, Shelley, the writer of some infidel poetry, has been drowned. Now he knows whether there is God or not, because he did not know there. He always say there's no God, but now it's time for him to know whether there's God because he's dead. So this is a comment that's made in a very sarcastic way because this person did not like him at all. Okay. And there are three young romantic poets, Byron, Shelley, and Keats. They all died around age 30. And they were lived just about at the same time. They all died 3 years apart, and they were born a couple of years apart. And they were very, very famous in different ways. Yeah. For example, Byron was a baron. He's a 子爵, and he is very wealthy from an aristocratic family, and having affairs with tons of beautiful women, including the prime minister's wife. There are many people that he was involved with. And Shelley was also involved romantically with many people, including his second wife's sister. And he all sorts of sordid stories we don't want to mention, but Keats is very different. He's very poor. He came from an honest family, not one of the peerage, 就是说他没有一个爵位的哈 and he died of tuberculosis very, very young. Now he's probably the youngest. They all have their different stories. On the other hand, there are old romantics. These people lived very long and very traditionally behaving. And William Blake is a good painter, artist. He draws beautifully. And Wordsworth and the Coleridge were considered Lake District. 我们说是湖畔诗人哈。The two of them both live nearby the lake. Wordsworth was never married, I think. They all lived pretty long, straddling the turn of the century. So they were born earlier than the younger ones, but they died much, much later. So these are the romantic poets. And then we talk about Breaking Bad, which is a TV series and rightfully considered the all-time best TV series in the world. It was in the Guinness Book of Record saying that the episode in this series called Ozymandias is garnered a rating of 99%. That's why that is written in the Guinness Book of Record. It has like 72 or 74 episode, and this is the 60th episode, and it's called Ozymandias, in which it described this protagonist, Walter White, who was played by Bryan Cranston. He was a disillusioned chemistry teacher in high school, and he had cancer, and he lost his job and had no medical insurance, and he was at his wit's end. He had no money, and he was very sick, so he started to make illegal drug and sell it, and he became wealthy beyond imagination, became very, very wealthy and ruthless, and kills people left and right, doing things that are wrong. And this is an episode called Ozymandias, meaning this main character in this episode becomes so powerful and rich and taking other people's life so lightly. He let his brother-in-law be killed in front of himself because he wanted his empire to continue. He didn't want the police to interfere with his life. That's why this episode is called Ozymandias, and that is why you hear him reading this poem. So many of them versions on YouTube. It's all coming from this very fine TV series, which was very sophisticated in many ways. In the year that this went to Emmy Award competition, Bryan Cranston, the actress who played his wife, both won an Emmy statuette of Emmy for their work in this episode called Ozymandias. He makes methamphetamine and vitamin. And I compare it with Lin Jiangxian, which could be very familiar to many people, and it's very short. 滚滚长江东逝水，浪花淘尽英雄。是非成败转头空， 青山依旧在，几度夕阳红。白发渔樵江渚上，惯看秋月春风。一壶浊酒喜相逢，古今多少事，都付笑谈中。Nowadays, this poem is always in the forward of how do you call that? It's not 水浒传, 三国演义, okay. 三国演义, if you open it before the first chapter start, they would have a preface, and certainly you will be able to see this, which is written by 明朝的杨慎, but he wrote it not because he read 三国演义, but because he read 三国志, He read the 21 history books from 史记, 然后是汉书, 后汉书, every dynasty has a history written by scholars of the next dynasty. So as a scholar, you would always read these history books. You would read 四书五经 or 十三经, which is the same thing. And you would read history starting with 史记. Every single sets of history a scholar would read. And Yang Shen was exiled by his emperor for some minor things, which to us is ridiculous. We know lots of scholars who went to the court to become administrative officials, and one move wrong, not pleasing the emperor, and they were banished to faraway places. And in his case, he went away for, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, for a long time, and died there. So world famous scholar, respected as the best scholar in the entire dynasty, just got banished to Yunnan and never got to come back. And he has lots of spare time reading books he enjoys reading. And some of them are the history books. And he wrote poetry after he read some episodes or passages in history, and was so moved that he looked at what Liu Bei and Cao Cao did in 三国志, and he wrote this. It's just say that no matter how powerful you were once, one day it'll all be gone. Everything is still around. The mountains, the rivers, the sun, they're all doing the same thing, but you are gone and your power is gone forever. Whatever you did is gone. So it might as well just be like me, to become not in power, not in office, and just look at this world and enjoy the scenery and drink some wine and laugh and talk about the powerful people. This is what he's thinking, okay? So this, you can find this originally in the poems that he wrote while he was reading the 21 histories. Nowadays we say there are 25 histories or whatever, but throughout the history, it was less than 25. And when he was reading history, there were 21, because there was no Ming Dynasty history, nor Qing Dynasty or whatever. So he read the history and he wrote this. And this was collected in the preface of 三国演义. He was banished in court because his emperor came to power not in a legitimate way. So he was one of the people who favored some other heir to become emperor. So the emperor was not happy with all the people who did not welcome him wholeheartedly when he was trying to become the emperor. So how can you blame somebody for that? They just bet on the wrong horse, that's all. And he went to Yunnan as an exile. During that time, he was able to return to his home 7 times. So back and forth, he passed by Luzhou 15 times. And one of those times, he wrote this poem in Luzhou Matou. And these are what he wrote. He's not only a poet, he also wrote lots of other books and essays. Things like 诗话 would mean that he read someone else's poetry and had something to say and either critique about someone else's poem or to write something to express his feelings. And some is about the idioms or stories, and some is 赋. 赋 would be a longer, maybe rhyming poetry, but cannot be sung. And he did some research like 地名考 or 艺文志. Oh, he's all around a scholar of a very respected status. Because he was banished to Yunnan, so he sometimes calls himself 博南山人 or 金马碧鸡老兵. For some reason, Kunming is called the land of 金马碧鸡 or 弼马金鸡. This is a picture I took in 2002. This is a 牌楼, which is called the 弼马金鸡街牌坊. And it's made of plastic this time. Everything in China, you would look at something and there could be a sign that says this is the 4th reconstruction of this or 5th or whatever, because the history is so long that things get made and remade all the time. 那临江仙 is a 词牌, we already said, and this is a format where you can use 仄声 or 平声 or rhyme. It's all indicated in the format, and there are 60 words in it. And here we have several famous poems who wrote 临江仙. This one is 李清照, 庭院深深深几许. This first line was taken from Ouyang Xiu, and she likes Ouyang Xiu's this line so much that she wrote many poems with this line at the beginning of the story. And we have Su Shi, which we dealt with in the past. 夜饮东坡醒复醉，归来仿佛三更. It's a very, very interesting, casual and even comedic. And the end is 小舟从此逝，江海寄余生. Somehow this format is good for you to write such kind of sentiment. And 曹雪芹, of course, he wrote this one when he was writing a 红楼梦. This is 临江仙柳絮词, is about 柳絮. When 贾宝玉 and his friends, they had a poetry club, and on this occasion, they chose to write a poem about Liu Xu, which is the catkin, the puffs of willow flowers, the seed pods. Okay, Liu Xu, the cotton of the cottonwood. This one is written by Xue Baochai, and everyone agreed this is the best of the whole group on that day. They had a competition. And she is talking about this Liu Xu. For next 2 weeks later, we're going to talk about the grapes of wrath, and just go to YouTube and look for the grapes of wrath. And it's a version with Henry Fonda. It's black and white, and it's in pretty good condition, and it's a very worthwhile watching movie. Okay, and the next movie it's not for a class, but I happen to find out that It's a Wonderful Life would be shown on AARP for free. You can go to AARP and look for it. It is to be shown on December 16th. That is 2 weeks, 19 days from now, and it's free. However, you need to go there now in order to click on register. To register, you need to put in your name and use your email address as your sort of a password or something, because when you register and the registration is confirmed, then they will send you a confirmation email, and when the time comes, they will send you a link. You just click that link in the email and you will be able to get in there. So you need to do this beforehand, and I don't mind to register, but if you don't want other people to know you, then you cannot watch it. They do not require you to be a member, but you need to have an account with your email address so that they can contact you, okay? And if it's your first time, it's better to go there not at the last minute, because in the beginning, I always have trouble getting in for some reason. But now that I've watched dozens and dozens of their movies, I had no problem whatsoever to click and get in. But if you are a newcomer, it's better to be there early. They do not show it on the dot. For example, it's 5 o'clock, whatever day it is. And at 5 o'clock, they will wait for about 2.5 minutes until it actually starts. But you should get there earlier. There was a time I said there was too many people and I could not get in, but that was quite long ago. I had no trouble getting in for years. This is a new thing since the pandemic. So in the beginning, it's harder, then it's easy. Okay. That is for today, and I'm going to stop share. Okay, do you have anything to say?
Thank you, teacher.
Oh. Hi. Last time, yeah,
谢谢老师。
the last time I was doing the travel. Oh, I think I don't know. Anyway, I was doing what? Okay, I was doing the talking, and before that I was recording my chorus thing. So I had the jack plugged in with the earbuds. So the earbuds was on my desk, but I forgot about it. So when I was giving that talk about travel, I could not hear anybody say. So I heard that many people were saying things to me, but I could not hear.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, that's why. Yes. How so stupid of me. Okay. So nobody wants to say anything? Okay. Thank you very much then.
Thank you.
谢谢。
Yeah, be prepared to watch that movie, The Grapes of Wrath. It tells you an entire new view of the history of America that many of us may not have known. The sad history of the United States of America. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.